All right, welcome to a special, unofficial episode of Life is Horror. This entire video will be dedicated to Final Destination 6. What to expect, or, what is it going to be about? I'm going to go over the rumored plot and characters, the names, their descriptions, and also talk about everything we know so far that has been confirmed, and the old plot, why it was scrapped, and what I want to see in this new Final Destination movie. So, it's there's been some news coming out about this movie in the last month. We got it officially confirmed, although it had been rumored for quite a while that it was going to be called Final Destination Bloodlines, but we got that confirmed on March 4th by producer Craig Perry. Went to social media and posted a picture of the chair that had the official title and logo on it, Final Destination Bloodlines, with the bloody font on it. And they are shooting in Vancouver from March 4th to May 13th. So it's a 10-week schedule, and all the other movies, except for Part 4, were shot in Vancouver. I actually just went to Vancouver last year and visited all the filming locations for 1, 2, 3, and 5. So now, when this movie comes out, I'll have an excuse to go back and visit these filming locations. So I do believe in the past I've talked about the directors already and who's going to write it, but let me just say it again here. This movie is going to be directed by Adam Stein and Zach Lipovsky, two directors. So that's a first for this franchise. It's usually been one director at a time. Now we got two, and these guys are the team responsible for the movie Freaks, the sci-fi horror film that was on Netflix for a while, and Tubi. Highly recommend it. Pretty good. It's a pretty good movie. And producers Craig Perry, he produced all the other films, and now we got John Watts producing, who is the guy responsible for this new movie. He's the one that went to the studio apparently and gave them the story idea, so he's getting the story credit and producer credit, but he's not writing the screenplay. And if you don't know who John Watts is, he's the guy behind Cop Car and Clown. And also, of course, the Spider-Man movies, but I'm not really big into that stuff. And the writers, okay, so this has been where there was a major change here, okay, because before John Watts got involved, we were told that Patrick Melton and Marcus Dunstan, the Saw guys and Feast trilogy, and the Collector, the Collection, those guys were the writers, and they wrote the plot that you see still listed everywhere you look as the official plot for this movie, a group of first responders. That's not true anymore. That was their script, but it was completely scrapped, and now we got John Watts and these two writers screenplay. The official screenplay will be written by Guy Busick, or Busick, however you say his name. Laurie Evans Taylor is his writing partner for this one, so those two are writing it. And it's also got Jeffrey Reddick credited as because he's the original writer, but I don't think he's writing the screenplay, but he gets the original writer credit because he's the one who wrote the first one with James Wong and Glenn Morgan. But yeah, Guy and Laurie, they're writing the screenplay based on a story by John Watts and Jeffrey Reddick. So yeah, they're writing the screenplay, and that's the first red flag for me is Guy, because I'm just not a fan of the recent Scream movies, the dialogue, the characters, and how they have like a dozen survivors in each movie. I hope he doesn't do that for this movie, because that's not what a Final Destination movie is all about. These movies are all about killing them all by the end. There's hardly ever survivors in these films. The Scream franchise, that's a whole different thing. There's always like 12 survivors in each movie. I hope he doesn't try to bring that shit over to this franchise. Please don't ruin my favorite franchise. This is like seriously top 2 franchises for me, so I hope he doesn't ruin it. Please, I just hope this is good. Cinematography. The DP for this movie is Christian Sabolt. Now, he shot Fear.com, which I think is one of the worst horror movies I've ever seen, and Resident Evil 2, and some other movies, but those are the 2 horror films that he shot. And now let's get into the cast. All right, so these are the official ones that were confirmed on like March 24th or 5th. Somewhere in late March, these were confirmed. So we got Breck Basinger as the lead female protagonist, supposedly. She is from Stargirl, and she was in 47 Meters Down Part 2. Very small role. But that's all I've seen her in. I don't watch TV series or anything, so the only thing I would recognize her from is 47 Meters Down 2. And then we got T.O. Bryans, I want to say is how you would pronounce that, or Bree Ones is how it's spelled. But he was in the Chucky TV series, and I don't know what else. But and then we got Richard Harmon from what's that horror and thought? He was in Low Lives that just came out recently on Tubi. Check that out, pretty good movie. And he's done quite a few horror movies, but he also does TV. What was it? Shit, the Grave Encounters 2. Grave Encounters 2. He was the lead actor in that movie. And we got Max Lloyd Jones and Anna Lore. I think she was in that They Them Kevin Bacon movie. I didn't watch it, but and then we got Caitlin Santawana. She was from the Friendship Game. I watched about 10 minutes of that movie and I couldn't bear another minute. Then we got Timpo Lee. He was in The Manor and Curse of La Llorona, I think is what it said. So yeah, he's done a couple movies I've seen. And then who else we got here? Oh, Raya Kilstedt. She was in Home Alone 3. I used to watch that one the most growing up. And Owen Patrick Joyner. He's done some Nickelodeon stuff. I don't recognize any of his movies. And now here's the unofficial. These are just people that got rent. Oh, wait, no. Tony Todd. He apparently signed on back in like September, October last year. There was a news report back then. He signed on. And if you followed him on Twitter, he posted about him going to Vancouver in March after they started shooting. He was in Vancouver for almost a week, few days shooting. So if he was only in Vancouver for a few days, then he must not be in the movie that much. He's probably gonna be in like one or two scenes, but that's usually par for the course for this franchise. He always has like one scene or two scenes, and that's it. So if he was in Vancouver for like 4 days this time, then I imagine that's gonna be the situation again. He's just gonna be in one or two scenes, even though there's been reports that rumored that this is going to be focused on his character a lot, like they're going to go into his backstory. But if he's not shooting that much for this movie, I can't imagine that being true unless it's like all flashback shit and they recast this character for the flashbacks. Okay, so unofficial, but I think I can confirm one of these. April Telek as Aunt Brenda. So we actually got a character name for this one. Everyone else has no character name that's confirmed, but April Telek, she's a local Vancouver Canadian actress, and I don't remember what she's been in. I didn't read it. And hold on, Yvette Ferguson and also Mark Brandon. So these are three like unofficial, but the other confirmed cast people have been posting pictures on their Instagram with April Telek with them. So I think it's safe to say that this is accurate, that April is going to be in the movie as Aunt Brenda. But we don't know officially what the other their characters' names are going to be. Now, the release date for this movie is supposed to be next year, but we don't know exactly when. But if I had to bet money, I would say, hopefully, the sooner the better. I would say in the first quarter of the year, somewhere between like January and April, somewhere in the spring. Because, the second Final Destination came out January 31st. The third one came out like February 10th. And the first one came out in mid-March, like around March 13th or 17th. So if they want this to coincide with the 25th, anniversary of the first movie, they could probably do it, almost the same day as the first movie and release it in March. So I'm hoping that they release it sometime, before summer, because I don't want to wait. I've waited long enough for this movie. It's been almost 15 years. So I want it as early as possible next year. So if they're done filming in May, you got like 6 months of post-production. They can get this movie out by January easily. So it just depends on how many CGI visual effects shots they got in the movie, I guess. But yeah, and they said they're going to release it in IMAX. So that's pretty cool. I haven't seen a Final Destination in IMAX, so this would be a cool movie to see in IMAX for sure, because they are hinting or teasing that there will be a big, opening disaster for this movie, like all the other ones. The directors posted a picture on their Instagram where there's like a giant slate, and they said something like, if the slate's this big, imagine how big the opening disaster is going to be. Just kind of teasing us with what it's going to be. I'm hoping it's big. The fifth one was the biggest so far with the bridge collapse. I'm hoping we get another big ass one that's in this as well. And so yeah, the old plot was the whole first responders thing that got scrapped, and Craig Perry was on some other YouTuber's channel talking about it a little bit, and he said the reason ultimately they got rid of it was just because they weren't satisfied with the third act. They didn't know exactly how to bridge the second act to the climax. Like, they knew how to end it. They had a little twist in the movie, but they just didn't know what the set piece was going to be to get there. They just weren't satisfied with what they had on the page, and they couldn't figure out how to make it better in the third act, so they decided to scrap it. So that's unfortunate that they couldn't figure it out, and we couldn't have gotten this movie a lot sooner. But so yeah, that got scrapped. Now the new plot. All right, so the new plot that's rumored, and it's been this rumored plot for quite some time. This got leaked like over a year ago, I think. And there's been leaked audition tapes also for this movie that confirm it, if they're legit audition tapes that I watched. But yeah, so this plot synopsis says, just as she is about to leave home for college, 18-year-old Stephanie, who's been having horrific nightmares about dying in a tower accident in the 1960s, discovers that her dream is actually a premonition that happened to her grandmother, Esther, who thwarted death 50 years ago but is now running out of time. Stephanie learns that through her grandmother, learned that though her grandmother thwarted death until she died in her 80s, and death has been going after the would have been victims of that long ago catastrophe, killing them off and then going after their children. That was a very long run on sentence. So Stephanie and her family realize that their bloodline isn't safe from death, who will take them violently and gruesomely in order of birth, unless someone like Stephanie figures out a way to stop it. So Jeffrey Reddick has said in interviews that this movie is going to change up the formula that we know. And now, reading this, I understand what he meant by that, because the formula is the premonition happens today, and the premonition is something that's going to happen, and then they stop it. But this woman's having a premonition of something that happened, that never happened, years ago. And now the title makes a lot more sense, Bloodlines, because it is their bloodline getting wiped out in order of birth. So it's going to go after the grandma first, and it says here she dies in her 80s. Does she die naturally of dies of old age, or does she get killed gruesomely by death? But then it's going to go after the parents, aunts and uncles, and then the oldest siblings, and so cousins, and so on and so forth. So yeah, that's a different formula, but it's still kind of the same, because there's an order to it. The other order in the other 5 movies was you die in the order you die in the premonition. This is you die in the order of whoever was born first. So that's a little different, but still kind of the same. So, which is fine by me. Like, this doesn't sound wildly different where it's like not even recognizable. Like, that doesn't sound like a Final Destination. Like, there's still a pattern to it. If there was no pattern at all and no premonitions at all, then I would be complaining, like, okay, this does not sound like Final Destination. But they just tweak it a little bit to make it different. So I'm fine with this plot. It's kind of cool. And apparently there's going to be all these other families that have gotten killed over the years, and now it's finally getting to this family. So it's like the grandma was the last one to die in that premonition, and she saved probably hundreds of people, and death just took a while getting to them, and eventually some of the further down the list people had kids that had kids, and so it's just taken this long to get to these people. So that's interesting. I like that. And there's room for so many other prequels. Like, we can go follow this family that should have been dead, but, got saved by this grandma. We can follow this family and that family. So this actually kind of opens the door to other, like, prequels if you wanted. But do it in a way where you don't know it's a prequel. If they could somehow do that, where at the end you realize, like, oh shit, these people are tied to that tower that was supposed to collapse. So yeah, so the opening disaster, I guess, is going to be a tower collapse. So I'm not sure how exciting that could be, but they did tease that it was going to be a big opening disaster. So I'm hoping we get to see like what's going on inside the building as it's collapsing, and it's not just like a quick shot of the building falling from the outside and nothing to it, just quick in and out. I hope we actually get to see something creative, death wise inside the building, people getting crushed, the elevator snaps and people fall to their deaths. I think I might have heard someone say something like it's going to be like a fancy like apartment high rise where there's like a restaurant at the top or something. So some crazy shit could go on up there, explosions. They could get really creative with this. So, yeah, okay, so here's the characters, the names. And again, this is just rumored. This has not been officially confirmed. But so yeah, all we have confirmed is the title and the cast, most of the cast, but not all of them. So here's the rumored character names and their descriptions. We got Stephanie Lewis, any relation to Evan Lewis in Final Destination 2? Who knows? So she's going to be the lead, the one going off for university. She's close to her younger, says POC brother. Does that mean piece of crap? her younger POC brother, Charlie. She's close to him, but he's been moody and angry lately because he feels that she's leaving him behind, yada yada. And uh, when Stephanie learns the truth about the nightmares that has been plaguing her, she realizes that her grandmother Esther was telling the truth about death. And so then we got Charlie. Charlie is the younger brother of Stephanie and normally very close to Steph. He is moody. I already said that. It says leaving him. He's mad at her for leaving him just like their mom did. So is their mom just out of the picture? Did she get killed by death already? I don't know. Charlie thinks the whole thing is nuts. So he's the skeptic character. There's always the skeptic characters that don't believe what they're trying to sell them. And then we got Bobby, good-hearted and anxious. Bobby is the high school football linebacker, so he's the jock character. And so yeah, this is going back to teenagers, which I like that. The first movie and the third movie were focused on kids in high school, college age, somewhere around there, high school, college age kids. And those are the two of my favorites in the series. And I don't know if that's why, but I think that's a good sign that we're going back to basics. We're going back to the younger crowd, because in the second movie, the fourth movie, and the fifth movie, it was all adults. But some of them were still kind of young, but it was mainly adults. And so this is going back to teenagers and college age kids. And Bobby is willing to try anything to thwart death. So I guess he's a believer. He's the believer character. And he's terrified of Stephanie's story. And we got Derek, who's a walking collection of piercings, tattoos, and a bit crude, full of ego, usually seen with a vape pen. I'm willing to bet Richard Harmon's going to be playing this character. Now, he's the tattoo guy, and it's been teased by Craig Perry in an interview that there's going to be a tattoo parlor kill scene, or maybe someone will almost get killed in a tattoo place, but I'm hoping we'll get a cool, gnarly tattoo piercing parlor kill scene. And this character description kind of confirms that, it makes that story credible. And we got just Esther's the grandma. There's no description of her. And then we got Julia, the tomboy, stylish, snarky. She is the sister to Derek and Bobby, and the cousin to Charlie and Stephanie. And she does not like Stephanie. That's what it says. She enjoys seeing her get knocked down a peg or two. And that's all we got so far for characters. So that's not all of them. It doesn't say anything about the aunts and uncles here or their parents. So, yeah. I'm wondering if they're going to somehow tie Tony Todd's character to this premonition. Like, was he a kid? Is Esther Tony Todd's mom? Because they said something in the leaked audio, like, audition that I listened to. It says something, the person was like, Esther had a premonition that Skyview Tower was going to collapse, and she was the last one to die, her and her son, or her little boy. I'm like, well, who's the little boy? Is it going to be Tony Todd as a kid? Timeline wise, I think that would make sense. His character would probably be a kid. Tony Todd would be a kid, probably in the 60s or whatever. Yeah, it's the 1960s. So yeah, I'm curious if they're going to explain that this is how Tony Todd's character Bloodworth knows so much about death, is because he's related to somebody who went through all this, who his mom or his aunt, somebody in his bloodline is someone who had a premonition once, and then he witnessed his family get taken out. And that's how he had all his information to give to Alex, to give to Kimberly. Although the information he gave in part two doesn't really seem to line up with this. It doesn't work. He says in part two, only new life can defeat death. But this whole plot makes that bullshit. Because you got all this new life that never should have existed in this bloodline, but death is still going after them. So that makes that in part two completely, false. So that doesn't work. But yeah, so here's what I want from this movie. I wrote down what I want to see in this Final Destination movie. Like, this is just like my fanboy wants and desires for this. Like, this is what I would want from it to make it a good Final Destination movie for me. So, first of all, I would just like it to be called Final Destination 6, because Bloodlines seems to be a bad luck charm. You got Wrong Turn Bloodlines, you got Pet Cemetery Bloodlines, you got Hellraiser Bloodlines, you got what was the other one? There's like a Day of the Dead Bloodlines, and there's one more, the Tremors Bloodlines. There's so many Bloodlines, and they're never good. None of those movies I just listed, I think, are good. So will this be the first one, though? Hopefully. This will, break that trend, stop the streak of horrible Bloodline movies, hopefully. So yeah, but it at least by reading that plot, it at least earns that title. It's not just random, like, fuck it, just call it Bloodlines, because we don't want to call it 6, or Resurrection, or Generation, the Next Generation. But yeah, I would rather it just be called FD6. An opening disaster, I want an opening disaster that's on par or better than my favorites, like part 3 or 5. Just a few minutes long with a couple of good kills in there, big in scope, a lot of action, especially if you're going to be seeing at IMAX. I want it to be big. All the premonitions usually last about 3 to 5 minutes in this franchise, except for the first one, which was only like a minute long. I want this one to be like on par, at least, with like 3 or 5. I just want it to be kick-ass, And also, I want this movie to go back to the tone of like the first movie. In the third one, a little bit. I think the first one and the third one was the closest to tone with the first one. The second and fourth one injected a lot of like dark comedy, and there's a lot of humor. The explosion at the end, the arm landing on the mom's plate, like all that. Like, I want it to go back to serious. It's okay to have like that one character who's just the goofball. He doesn't believe in it. Like Ian's character in FD3, when he goes on that rant about like, oh, well, what if I was eating French toast and then Princess Diana died in France, and like whatever he says there, like he's just being a smartass. Like, it's okay to have those smartass, goofy characters, but to make like every death sequence like a laugh out loud, like that was stupid type of thing. Like some of the kills in part 4 with the racist who gets killed and his head lands on the lawn, and it's got that goofy expression. It's like, how would his head explode off like that? It's just, I don't want that kind of humor in this movie. Go back to the first movie and the third one, where the deaths had a punch and you're like, oh shit, and like just really painful and gruesome and creative. And that's another thing I want. I want creative kills in this one, because that's what the whole franchise is about, especially after part 1. You gotta get creative, and I want there to be at least like 2 sequences of that like long Rube Goldberg device type of scene, where it's like mousetrap, this bumps into this bumps into that, and it just keeps you guessing, because that to me is the fun of these movies. On first watch, where you're in the theater, you're like, okay, what's gonna kill them? Is this gonna do it? Is this gonna do it? Like I still remember being in the theater watching part five, and when that the one doofus walks into the massage parlor place and he pats on the Buddha statue. I remember being in the theater going like, "That's gonna kill him." I don't know how, but that's gonna do something. And then turns out I was right. So that was just fun, in the theater, like, yes, I called it. But then all the other ones take you by surprise, the laser eye surgery one and then the gymnastics one. Those kinds of sequences, those are what I love in a Final Destination movie, where it's not just so quick. There's a build up to it, like the drive through scene in part three, even, and like just you gotta have a few of those where it's just a build up, not just all of them kind of quick. Um, like the bus kill. I don't want them to try to do that again. They tried doing that again in part four to recreate that shocking bus kill with the ambulance, and it just fell flat. Don't try to outdo yourself with that again. Just give us some cool sequences, elaborate deaths that aren't too elaborate, where it's like over the top and unbelievable or something, and just a joke. you know. And I would like them to somehow like fit 180 into it. I don't know how, but just do it because it's in all the other five movies somewhere. Even if it's like reversed 081, like they did on the train in part 3. And also I like the Easter eggs that you get in this franchise. A lot of these movies have like these little Easter eggs, these things that connect it to the other films that show you that they're in the same universe. Like there's a lot of them in part five, the beer company, the log truck on the bridge in part five, just all these little winks and callbacks. Like just throw in a couple of those for the fans of the franchise to really like pick up on. Like, oh shit, I get that. Because that's just fun in the theater when like you get it, but everyone around you doesn't, but you're the only one smiling in the theater. Like just give the fans a treat like that. Just throw in these little Easter eggs. Um, Another great opening credit sequence. This is a small thing, but I love the credit sequences in parts 3, 4, and 5. They're just so fun. Just give us another fun opening credit sequence because that's just something that's died in the last 10 years. Like, you don't get opening credit sequences. The movies just start. You might get the title card, but that's it. Go back to the other movies in this franchise. Give us a fun, uh, you know, opening credit sequence that's on par with 3, 4, and 5. I love those credit sequences. And, have the lead find clues. Like, I like when there's clues as to how the next person's gonna die, but I don't like what they did in 2 and 4 as much, where it's like just constant visions in their head of something. I like how in part 1, it was just like a piece of paper that said Todd, and then like the ashes that were in the air that foreshadowed the fire, and then, stuff like that. And part 3 was all the pictures. I love the picture stuff, but I doubt they'll do that again because they already did it once. And also, I would like them to explore Tony Todd's character a little bit, not too much, but just enough, and make it to where it fits. I don't want them to retcon anything. Put this movie in the same universe as the other films, and make the timeline work, and explain a little bit like how he got his information maybe, but that's it. Like, I don't need to know too much. I don't need to know exactly why these people are getting visions, what's causing them, but I would like to know just a little bit more about Tony Todd's character, like how he got all this information. um Also, you know, a scary score. Like the music in the first 3 movies they're incredible, and it's just it's a shame that the composer Shirley Walker died. um but yeah, the score in those movies were awesome. The score in part 4 was like an action movie, and a little bit more also in part 5. And those two were both done by like Brian Tyler. He does a lot of action movies, so it makes sense. But yeah, just go back to basics. Go back to creepy. Give us an eerie score like the first 3. Make it Shirley Walker esque. Something that she would create. Don't have a shit ton of survivors. All right, guy who's writing the movie, don't make it another Scream 5 and 6 where you got like 7 people living. All right, 1 or 2 survivors at the most. Kill a lot of these people off. Give us some creative kills. Don't make it a super happy ending, because that's not what this franchise is about. It's about death, and death is never a happy thing. We all die. And so all these characters, if not, most of them should die. I don't want there to be a shit ton of survivors at the end. No 3D. Don't make this a 3D movie. I feel like 3D kind of hurt part 4 especially. And all those bad like CGI 3D shots. And avoid doing the whole police detective FBI subplot thing. They did that in 1 and 5, barely in 3. It felt like there was like a scrapped part of the script in part 3 where there was those two cops, but they just kind of got rid of it. But you see them kind of lingering in the back from time to time. Don't do that again because we've already done it twice before, and it's just not interesting because we already know what's happening, and it's not fun watching these cops try to piece things together, and they never do. And I, because I'm a sick bastard, would like this to be the first Final Destination movie that kills a kid or like a handicapped person. Just do it. I doubt they'll do it, but they were supposed to in part 2. That kid who gets splatted, he's like 16 in the movie, his character, he was supposed to be like 8 to 12 in the script, but the studio said no. So I'm sure they're going to say no again. But yeah, that's those are the things that I would want in this movie. So what do you guys think? What do you think about that rumored plot? What do you guys want to see in Final Destination Bloodlines? Let me know in the comments below. Adios.